You all know how much I love horrible, bad movies, and I am just giddy with excitement right now to talk about a movie I just saw that I now consider to be the goofiest film ever made. I just got back from the theater from seeing Moonfall, which is Roland Emmerich's new disaster porn. He's the man behind, like, 2012, Day After Tomorrow, some classics. And with this bad boy, he has created the stinker masterpiece, a smelly magnum opus. This movie, I can't even believe actually exists. I saw it in IMAX because I don't like to just watch a bad movie. I want to feel a bad movie, and goddamn did I feel it deep in my ass. This was an absolutely wild ride from start to finish. If somebody asked me what the best movie ever made was, I'd say Moonfall. If someone asked me what the worst movie ever made was, I'd say Moonfall. I don't know whether to give Moonfall a 100% on the moist meter or a 0. This fucking thing was so beautifully awful in all of the perfect ways. I just can't describe it. It is the actual perfect storm of dog shit put into film. The movie was like 2 hours long, and I swear to God, it felt like 20 minutes. I was upset when this movie ended. I just wanted it to keep going and going. This movie could have ran 8 hours, and I wouldn't have complained if it kept up this intensity. It was an amazing experience. So, spoiler alert, I want to go into it. I really want to fucking peel apart these stinky cheeks and tell you all about this movie start to finish. And let me just go ahead and say, this movie had the audacity to try and hint at a universe, like a Moonfall extended universe, kind of like the Marvel or Star Wars universe they created. Moonfall did that towards the end, and I need a sequel. The human race deserves a sequel to Moonfall. So let's get into it. So the movie starts with our main character, Brian, played by Patrick Wilson, in space with our other extremely important character, I forgot her name already, but played by Halle Berry. That's another thing about this movie. I saw it with Andrew, and the second we left the theater, we couldn't remember a single one of the characters' names apart from, like, Brian and the cat's name, which was Fuzz Aldrin. So, like, that's another thing. Like, all the characters are super forgettable. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson's character, they're in space working on the space shuttle. And there's another character there with them that's helping, and then all of a sudden, a massive cloud of space dust blasts the ship. It tears it to pieces, knocks out Halle Berry, and it sends Brian, like, scrambling to get inside. And then the other guy, who I don't even know if they even gave a name to, his line gets cut, and he just gets sent, like, quadruple backflipping through space for all eternity and dies. And then when they arrive back at Earth, they blame Brian for the whole event, despite there being camera footage of this space dust being the culprit, destroying the ship. They're blaming Brian. They're like, you are a disgrace. Your negligence caused the death of an astronaut and the destruction of so much money worth of, NASA parts. You're going off book now. Get out of NASA. So then he gets fired. His wife leaves him. His kid hates him. He's now like this drunkard who is really just scraping by and struggling. For some reason, the whole trial was public and he's insisting he was innocent. It was this very strange technological space dust that just fucking flew through like a fart. And he traced it back to a corner, like a quarter of the moon called like Mars Capri Sun or something. I already forgot the name of it. But no one believed him. Everyone mocked him. He got fired. His life ruined as a result. And then we're introduced to a very important character called KC. KC is a conspiracy theorist who really cracks the code that the moon is falling out of orbit. And KC believes it's because the moon is actually a megastructure put there by aliens. So he has his own little group of conspiracy theorists that also believe in the megastructures. And he tries very hard to bring this information to NASA to let them know that the moon is out of orbit, shit's gonna get rough. So just like in Majora's Mask, the moon is coming closer to Earth, and the closer it gets to Earth, the worse it is for humans because the gravitational pull from Earth will rip apart the moon, sending all of these giant chunks into the planet, destroying pretty much everything. A doomsday event, an apocalypse. And no one's believing KC, even though he has all of the research and evidence to back it up. So eventually he turns to Twitter. And he makes an anonymous post with all of the evidence, and miraculously overnight the entire world believes him. It becomes the #1 trend, and every single news outlet everywhere is talking about it. NASA comes forward to corroborate it. Now everyone knows, yep, Moon's about to fuck our shit up. So then they all try and come up with plans, and I swear to God, every character in this movie makes the stupidest decisions at every possible moment. It blew me away. It's like every character, even the ones that are supposed to be smart, like the scientists, are like lobotomized zombies. They get nothing right. None of it makes sense at all. But even suspending disbelief, you can't help but just sit there and scratch your head like there's no way they just said or did that. Like, I'm trying to sum it up to give you the cliff notes before I like start really dissecting it. So once it's been confirmed that the moon's coming to the Earth, Brian, the disgraced astronaut, teams up with Casey. They hang out for a bit, and then Halle Berry, who's still employed by NASA, just out of nowhere sends a helicopter to pick both of them up to help them defeat the moon, because now the moon's like a raid boss. So then they come up with a plan to like take an EMP device to the moon. Everyone believes them now. Also, NASA confirmed all of this and then like really figured they needed Brian's help because they sent like a crew of 3 astronauts up to check out that crater, and then the giant space dust came up in the shape of like a goddamn ringworm, and it kills all 3 of them. So then they conclude like, yep, there's something weird and wacky going on with the moon. It's got some kind of artificial intelligence living inside of it. So then that's when Brian and Casey come. My God. I really want to get deeper into it, but I want to give everyone like the full overview of the movie so you can see it. This whole movie is like taking the insanity of a Neil Breen movie, but giving it $100 million to realize the craziness. A better example for all the weebs. If you've seen Gurren Lagann, where they start like underground, and then by the end of the show, they're in space mechs throwing galaxies at each other. It's that, but for pseudoscience and conspiracies. It's fucking mind-blowing. So Brian, Casey, Halle Berry, they're at NASA. Everyone knows Doomsday's coming, so they're all, for some reason, taking refuge in Colorado. The word Colorado must have been mentioned a million fucking times throughout this movie. This had to be just some kind of propaganda to increase tourism there or something. And also you see Kaspersky on billboards, and apparently all of NASA is powered by Kaspersky antivirus, because every time they fire on a computer, it just says Kaspersky. And that's all there is on the screen. It's just like they look at Kaspersky and things start helping. But I keep getting too specific. Again, everyone's at NASA. They come up with a plan. They get this old EMP device that they're going to take to the moon and blow up the space worm. And this also confirms that space dust that blew up the ship that Brian was on initially were nanobots from the AI. So they've got the plan. They've got the EMP. They've now got Brian to pilot it. But something goes wrong. The moon's getting closer, so an earthquake happens, and it cracks the coolant in one of the engines, and it plays out exactly like this. I'm not exaggerating. Halle Berry and Brian go up to check out what's going on. One guy says, the coolant's leaking, and I don't know how to fix it. No one here can really fix it. And she's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. She's like, all right, well, that's the end of the mission. I guess everyone needs to go home. So every single person at NASA, except for Halle Berry, Casey, and Brian, as well as 2 other data analysts and a couple of military guys, all leave and abandon the Earth and just like, yep, I guess we just have to accept this is the apocalypse and there's nothing we can do. Just because one of the coolants was leaking a little bit, and then the solution, I shit you not, was we'll just fly without it. Apparently the entire time they could just fly without it because the moon was close enough, and Casey knew that and then relayed the information a little late to Halle Berry, and she just didn't bother to call anyone back. She's like, all right, well, I already told them they can leave. They can go. We can do it ourselves. So then we get our heroes strapping into the spaceship, ready to take on the moon. And as the moon's getting closer, it's causing gravitational disturbances. So there's water that's getting sucked up, and it's like giant waves of water that are just standing there. And those 2 like data analysts that stayed behind that I briefly mentioned, they get evacuated. They get into a helicopter with the military people because the waves are getting closer as the moon's passing over. And I can't even believe this fucking happened. They take off with plenty of time to escape, but instead of going away from the waves, the goddamn pilot kamikazes into the waves, and it's supposed to be this emotional moment of, oh my God, there is no escape. But like you can see, when the helicopter takes off, it could have just gone right, but instead inexplicably just goes left into the waves. And I'm missing so many impressive details. Brian's son, who hates him, went to jail. Brian got him out of jail. And for some reason, the military flew Brian's son here just to be in like the middle of the shitstorm. So Brian's son's there and then needs to take off in a car away from the facility as the waves are getting closer. But instead of taking off, he goes to a mountain and parks just to check out his dad's spaceship as the waves are getting closer. So the spaceship takes off, it's beating the waves, but his son and then Halle Berry's son is also with him, and then their babysitter are all just in this car, outside of this car watching. And then eventually the kid's like, all right, now it's time to probably go, as the waves are literally like bashing the bumper of the car. It's like, okay, we've had our fun. So then they engage on this high-speed chase against the moon, and then they eventually get hunted by people that are like scavenging for parts. Oh my god, it's so much. So everything on Earth's going to shit. The gravity's all fucked up. Halle Berry, Brian, and Casey are now heading towards the moon, and it turns out the AI that inhabits the moon is attracted to electronics, but only if there's organic life inside of it. So the EMP they brought is useless because the AI won't bite it. So they're using it like bait and trying to fish with it. But for some reason it needs to be inside of it. They don't explain why. The AI was circling it and like playing patty cake with the EMP, and they didn't blow it up for no reason. They just concluded that it needs to be inside. So they get the EMP back and go deeper in the moon, and it turns out the moon is actually a Dyson sphere built by aliens, confirming Casey's theory that also happens to grow potatoes inside of it for some reason. And it's a Dyson sphere encapsulating a white dwarf that it's using for its power source, and the AI is sapping the power from the white dwarf. And then the AI gets alerted to the crew that's in the spaceship that's flying around. And then a door opens in the Dyson sphere as the AI is tracking them, and it shuts, closing off the AI and then saving the crew. And then it turns out that the Dyson sphere wasn't built by just any aliens. It was built by ancient humans, and they communicate to Brian through celestial beams and flashbacks of his son talking to him, kind of like in Mass Effect 3 where the Reapers take on the body of a child. They did that for Brian in order to talk to him. It was a sentient AI being, like it was an AI construct for the Dyson sphere. It was built by humans that billions of years ago were spacefaring, hyper-advanced technological superstars, and eventually they created an AI that turned on them via kind of like Skynet, and it made all of them go extinct. But before their final extinction, they built giant moons that they would toss out to corners of the universe to try and remake humanity elsewhere. And this just happened to be the last surviving one, the only one the AI couldn't find until this movie. So that's the explanation there. Eventually they upgrade the EMP, the AI construct on the moon, like turbocharges the EMP, then gets some defense systems going that just start shooting bullets at the AI, and then they're escaping the moon. Casey blasts open the hatch with himself inside because he says, you know, an organic being needs to be with the technology in order for the AI to bite me. And he's like, oh my god, Casey's gonna die. Brian and Halle Berry are upset, and Casey's like, no, it's fine. So the AI starts eating him, and he's like, you underestimated us, blows up the EMP. And then, you know, Casey's dead, AI is gone now, so the moon is back. So then the moon leaves Earth, and now it's just this giant Dyson sphere that is now outside of Earth, and everyone's happy. Earth's super fucked. Everything flooded. Everything got absolutely destroyed, but there's still some people left, and now the moon's our friend again. And, yeah, that's not where it ends. So Casey didn't actually fully die. The AI construct on the moon installation actually copied his consciousness into their database, and now Casey has become the moon itself. And the last line is, we have work to do, which hints at expanding the universe and bringing all of the other AI that is still out there into the fold. And my god, I can't wait to see the sequel. I pray there is one, because this was amazing. I am not even doing this justice with my brief explanation. I need to get into the nitty-gritty of it to tell you just how fucking off the wall this shit was. So the billion-year-old humans, they basically just created Halo. They just stole Halo's plot for a little bit. The installations they made back then were Halo rings. They all lived on Halo rings. And the AI they made, for some reason, turned on them like Cortana. Almost in the same fashion. They deemed that humans weren't worth saving and that they were inferior to them, and just started wiping them out inexplicably. Like, this movie is fucking incredible. Like, the visuals were kind of cool. Like, you know, you always like to see those big budget disaster visuals. And when they'd have the moon peeking over the earth, it looked cool. And they had awesome lines such as, "Watch out, the moon is rising." And then all of a sudden, like, boats would be flying overhead. Fucking manatees falling onto the ground. Oh my god, it was so good. And there was like an advertisement for Alexis. Because when there was these people, the scavengers that were hunting down the son, eventually the son meets up with Brian's wife and her new husband that cucked him or whatever. And they're on this high-speed chase, and they can't get away, right? These scavengers, they're so fast, and they want their oxygen tanks. And they're in a Lexus, and they keep zooming in on the Lexus and like throwing it, drifting around. And the dad goes, "Hold on, I'm putting this into warp speed." And they zoom in on the Lexus logo, and then him turning from economy mode to sport mode, and then it fucking turbocharges and goes wild. Then they're able to outrun him. This movie, man, is actual fucking genius. Like, I can't talk enough about it. Every single moment of this movie, when you think they've run out of stupid juice, finds another way to make it even dumber. And I couldn't appreciate it more. I loved it. I fucking loved it. I don't even know how you make a movie this dumb. On accident, too. Like, this isn't a self-aware movie. There is no self-awareness in this movie at all. There's a couple of jokes, but they're not like self-aware jokes. They're just like general, decently written jokes. But nothing is self-aware. It really takes itself super seriously, and I love that about it. The best kind of bad movie is one where the director really wanted to do something special but just didn't have the talent or the vision to realize it. And this is one of those cases. It is, in every possible department, the best way to make a bad movie. It is the worst and goofiest movie in all of the right ways. I just don't think you could make a movie this stupid on purpose. This movie was just an amazing experience. This was something truly special. If you like bad, shitty movies, this is the movie to go see. This is going to be 2022's best stupid movie, I think. It would be tough to beat this one. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because I've had a smile on my face ever since leaving the theater. There's still so much more I could talk about with this movie. I've barely even scratched the surface of lunacy with Moonfall. But it's just, without you having seen the movie, it's not going to make as much sense. And sense is a word that is blasphemous to even use in the same sentence as Moonfall. That word never once crossed the mind of anyone who touched the script for this. The whole movie just felt like it was kids going and then trying to one-up each other. Nothing connects logically. Obviously, nothing here is mathematically, scientifically accurate, or even common sense accurate. Like, everything is wrong in the perfect ways. Like, for example, they're able to find everyone in the world just because. So, like, when they find Brian and Casey, they're in, like, this fucking random hotel somewhere, and somehow they just get found because. Or, like, the family is trekking through snow at the very end, and somehow they just make it to where they need to be without dying along the way and then get found. Like, everything, it just happens because fuck it. And I love that about it. It's so shameless in its horribleness. It was amazing. Just an incredible experience that I wanted to talk about a little bit. That's about it. See ya. All of you know how much I love fun, bad movies. To date, Moonfall is still the most entertaining film I've ever seen because it is a beautiful disaster of a movie. $100 million budget and not a single thing about it is even close to being good. It's amazing for all the wrong reasons, and it is one of the most entertaining films ever constructed by our species. So I have a huge passion for fun, bad films, so I was very excited to see Meg 2 today because I watched the first Meg. It's nothing special, but it's enjoyable and it's very silly and it's, of course, a bit stinky. It's a movie about Jason Statham hunting down a megalodon shark, so of course it's going to be a bit goofy. And Meg 2 was rolling around and I expected it'd be a lot of the same. Some stinkiness, some silliness, put them in a pot and create a wonderful stew out of it and put a smile on Charles's face. And to a certain extent it did. But it's also legitimately one of the stupidest movies I've watched in quite some time, and in a lot of ways, it's dumber than Moonfall. And I don't say that lightly. To say something is stupider than Moonfall is a bold claim that you need empirical evidence to back up. That's a claim that's bordering on insanity to say out loud. But I mean it, and I'll prove it here when I break down Meg 2 for you. So, of course, there's going to be spoilers here. I'm just going to rip the band-aid off right now. I don't think you're really going to watch Meg 2 for the story. I don't think anyone's going to this film for the narrative. You know, no one's watching porn for the plot, and no one's watching Meg 2 for the character relationship and the overarching plot. A plot that is so fucking simple, I legitimately think Ed from Ed, Edd n Eddy made it after eating 5 slabs of buttered toast. It is baffling that this actually even made it into the film. It should have just been a montage of shark carnage and Jason Statham going, "What's up, chum?" and then kicking people into the shark. That's an actual line from the movie, by the way. Like, it would have been better if that's the direction they went, but unfortunately, the biggest sin this movie commits is it is boring for about 80% of it. 80% of this movie isn't spent on megalodons or action or characters fighting against megalodons. For some reason, they made the first 80% a fucking soulless, garbage, poorly written, embarrassing, corporate corruption conspiracy mystery movie. And that's using a very generous term for it, because calling this a mystery in the first 80% is an insult to the English language. It's more like a pistory, because it belongs in a toilet. So, the first 80% is dedicated to explaining the world now. There's a very expensive expedition group that's led by Jason Statham, and they do these deep dives into a trench that has these megalodons roaming around, and they're separated from the rest of the ocean thanks to this barrier that they can't cross. There's a very strong jutsu, and the megalodons aren't allowed to either enter or exit. But this team that Jason Statham is a part of is financially backed by tons and tons of doubloons. So many clams. They have so much money. They have a lot of very powerful people financing it. And they also have a megalodon in captivity that they're training and raising like a pet to understand a bit more about megalodons as a whole. Now, the team is about to go on a routine dive. They've done, I think, 26 successful missions or something like that. And this was supposed to be just another standard trip, but things went a bit awry. Now, there's another passenger aboard this ship, this giant, complex, and it's a child that Jason Statham is raising and teaching, and she's a genius. She's a 14-year-old super genius, fucking Jimmy Neutron level intellect, and she sneaks aboard the expedition vehicle with Jason Statham and the team, which he's very upset about. He's like, "This is very not good. I'm very disappointed that you've done this. We're turning this ship around." But then they're like, "No, we'll just press forward." And so they do. He didn't take a whole lot to convince them. But while they're doing that, that megalodon they have in captivity breaks out. And do you want to know how it breaks out? Well, because there was like a single metal grate, like a single metal cheese grater that was supposed to stop a fucking megalodon, an absolute monster. So it just easily breaks through with literally no effort, and we're supposed to be shocked that it did this. I don't understand how, because it was basically just a single piece of construction paper that separated the megalodon from the rest of the world. So that right there was already extremely lazy to me. They could have had some kind of cool plot, like showcasing the megalodon being really smart, like, the megalodon set a trap, it played dead, it went belly up. So when they went in there to check on the megalodon's heartbeat, it fucking mauled them all and then escaped. Maybe it grew wings and flew away. I don't know. Just anything besides it went through a basically open tunnel that we didn't think about. So as they're going on this dive, the megalodon that they had in captivity starts chasing them. And they're like, "How is that possible? We've got to dive deeper. It's the only way to escape it." So they dive deeper. Then they eventually go into the very deepest part of the trenches. And they're speculating on if they should just abandon the mission because this is already not going according to plan. So Jason Statham's like, "Should really abort mission." And even the main, base is like, "Yeah, probably a good idea. This is already totally off book here. Let's just get the fuck out." But the actual owner of the company, the whole enterprise, is like, no, this is a really good opportunity to explore. We're explorers, god damn it, this is what we do. And our Megalodon came down here because she wants to mate. It's mating season for Megalodons, and I'm fucking horny. We're gonna go watch. And they're like, well, if you say so, shucks. So they continue to go deeper into the trenches, and then they stumble upon an underwater base. And I shit you not, for about 10 minutes, I really thought they were about to bring Atlantis into this. They were like, oh my god, there's an underwater base here. This is so weird. Wait, I'm getting heat signatures. There's living creatures on that base. And I was like, oh my god, they're going to do Atlanteans here. Oh, this is going to be incredible. But they don't. It turns out there was a different company, a shadow organization that had the same access to the technology they did, and they had this underground base that this team of good guys, the explorers, stumbled upon. And this is where the corporate conspiracy starts to unfold. They start wondering, how is that possible? We're 25,000 feet deep. No one has access to this kind of shit except us. What's going on here? There's fishy business, and I'm not liking the smell. So then we get to go into one of the bad guys' submersibles, and he's like, oh, they stumbled upon us. There's only one option. And then the guys, there's like a team of 3, and 2 of the guys are in these like underwater, fucking Gundam suits, and they're like mining away at barnacles, and they're like, no, don't do it, wait, no, don't do it. He's like, I've got to do it, they've seen us. I'm like, no, please don't. And he just blows everything up, including himself. He doesn't die from it, spoilers, but he blows everything up in the trenches, which blows up the barrier, like the genjutsu that keeps all of the megalodons in the trenches. So he blows that shit up. He blows up the heroes' submarines and everything. And then they're in a big scramble because they can't escape now because their submarines are fried. So they get into these high pressure suits and they start making the walk on foot from the crash site of the explosion all the way to that base that they identified. Now, just to put you in the right headspace here, it's a fucking snooze fest. And it's already been like 30 or 35 minutes by this point, so it's a slow burn. Meg 2 puts the Megalodons in the back seat. It puts them as like sidekicks. Like they have cameos in this movie, basically, because they spend the first 80% with this garbage here. It's so fucking boring. But anyway, the explorers with Jason Statham and the child and everyone else get in touch with the main base, like, hey, we're gonna need that rescue submarine. Shit went tits up down here, and we need a little help. This one lunatic blew us to kingdom come. Blew us to high heavens. Our submarines don't work anymore. Come get us. And they're like, we're on it. Actually, scratch that. We can't. Somebody sabotaged our rescue sub. And now you can see all of the complex narrative plot devices coming into play. So then they have to figure out who sabotaged it. So naturally, they check the surveillance cameras. But it turns out our culprit was smart enough to turn off all of the surveillance cameras. But what they didn't realize is they had built in a fail-safe security camera system. So they go and check that. And it's revealed that our man on the inside, our evil person on the good guys team, is a girl named Jess. And she's evil because she wants money. She says that she's doing it because she wants more money than she could ever possibly care about, where money loses all meaning to her. So it turns out what they were doing down there on that base is they were mining rare earth minerals. And I shit you not, when they go into the base, one of the main guys is like, what is this? And he's like, oh wait, this is rare earth minerals. He literally says it's rare earth minerals. And it's like, they're probably using this for superconductors, which is good for quantum computation devices as well as all kinds of transportation. This is very important stuff. No doubt, this one crystal I'm holding in my hand is worth $1 billion. And Jason Statham's like, billion? With a B? Like, I think I'm actually quoting this verbatim. I'm pretty sure I've got this right on the money if you check the script. And he's like, yes, with a B. And then that's when Jess is like, billions of dollars are at stake here. And then it gets even bigger because it turns out Jess isn't the only person working on the inside. The main girl who's financing all of this, the big CEO super powerhouse who gave a speech in the very beginning of the movie about how proud she is of this company, she is the one who's pulling all of the strings. She's the puppet master and everyone else is just the marionette on the strings dancing for her. And she's like, why aren't they dead yet? What's going on? So, I want to pause real quick because I'm probably overstimulating your brains right now. I want to point out a huge plot hole that I can't believe no one on the team recognized. The way that this is conveyed is that this is all part of the plan. What they wanted to do is kill everybody on board that main base, or rather, they wanted to kill everyone on board those subs. That was the plan from the get-go, I believe, unless I missed a crucial detail. But even Jess, who was one of the core team members, advised that they pull out of the mission when the child was on board the submarine. She's like, okay, yeah, things are a little off course, should probably pull out. So if their plan was to kill them, why would she advise that? Plus, there was no plan in place. The only reason this went so wrong is because the Megalodon unexpectedly broke out. None of this was planned or orchestrated. And the only reason there was ever an explosion in the trenches is because they accidentally stumbled upon that secret base and mining operation because they were trying to watch some sharks fuck. Like, all of it was pure happenstance. None of this was planned, and yet every step of the way, that evil lady CEO's like, you know, why aren't they dead yet? We talked about this. You sabotaged the rescue vehicle, did you not? How could they still be alive? As if it was all part of the plan. Even though there was clearly no fucking plan. The whole plot falls apart, like, if you think about it for more than 3 seconds. And another thing, why the fuck would the owner of the company that has the access to the technology, is actively doing dives and everything, why would they even bother having a separate shady organization that's doing the same thing but then collecting rare earth minerals? Like, they're making billions of dollars off the rare earth minerals, but they could also still be doing that with the explorer team. They could just say, like, hey, we're also going to send a mining team down with you. Like, I don't think anyone would care. This is a completely separate from the rest of the world region where they're just mining rare earth minerals no one else has ever seen or had access to before. The explorer team would actually probably be pretty excited about that because it's more information and more knowledge for them. Like, they get to take in these things and learn about them. So I don't even understand the nefarious need to have, like, an evil group alongside your normal group. You could have just merged them together without any of the evilness. You could have just been like, alright, and now bring me back some fucking barnacles. They're super barnacles. Those are turbocharged magic barnacles. So let's just get a few of those and we can sell them and continue to finance these expeditions. And I don't think anyone would bat an eye. Like, I don't understand what the conflict even was to even have them as a group in this movie in the first place. There's a single throwaway line that I think is what they tried to get across, and it's from Jason Statham. He said that you're doing this for money. So I guess that's what made it inherently bad and needed to be split away from the expedition group, even though all of their expeditions are also for money. Like, they were also a profit-driven organization too. So it was like a really weird dynamic there. And then there was one line from the evil CEO who said, we can destroy the planet from underneath the trench and no one would ever know. We'll destroy all of it and sell it all for billions of dollars, is basically what her monologue said. And it's like, okay, but also we never had access to that before. So you're right, no one would know, and you're not really destroying the planet. They were literally chipping away some of the, like, crystals on the side of things. It wasn't like deforestation underwater. It was like actually a very small scale operation with only like a handful of crystals. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal, really. So they did a horrible job of showcasing why the bad guys are doing what they're doing in the first place. So now let's get back to the plot. So they're walking from their destroyed submarines and their high-pressure Power Ranger suits to go to their base that they found and then take escape pods to get to the surface. And along the way, things get messy. There's like some deep-sea creatures with some sharp teeth that start biting them. So our people start shooting back with their spear guns. One guy gets abducted by a giant squid and he dies. You don't see it. It's all off screen. Another girl gets eaten by a shark, a megalodon. You don't see it. This is a PG-13 movie, so they don't show any of, like, the carnage or anything. So pretty much every death in this movie is either off-screen or cut away from right away, which doesn't make any sense for a fucking movie about sharks killing people and killing sharks in return. Such a huge blunder. I understand why it's PG-13, because it's more profitable to do that, because it's more accessible to people, but it still takes all of the wind out of the sails of every single action moment, of which there is very few in this movie. So they're going on this, journey from their subs to the base. They lose everyone along the way except for 4 people. Of course, the main 4, Jason Statham, the kid, the main guy behind the operation, and then another girl who was a big part of the team. So they make it to the base. Then that guy who blew everyone up cements himself as like the primary antagonist who's going to keep clashing with Jason Statham. So they end up fighting on this base. Jess reveals herself to be the person on the inside who's pulling on the strings. She traps them in that base and tries to drown them, but Jason Statham swims, I shit you not, swims with no gear from the place where they were drowning outside of the base to hit the emergency override button and save everyone. He is swimming with no gear at 25,000 feet. Nothing, very few things rather, can fucking survive at 25,000 feet under the sea. And at the very bottom of the list of things that could maybe survive, humans are there. Humans cannot. Fucking everything blows up under that immense pressure. We have never even seen something that deep. And yet, Jason Statham, powered by testosterone and a deep voice, is able to just man mode it and fucking swim like a goddamn angelic mermaid. Just Olympic swim at 25,000 feet deep to save the crew. And they try and give an explanation for it, but I swear to God, I had to wiggle my finger and say, no way, that's horseradish. No shot. Their explanation was something like, as long as he inhales enough water into his sinuses, it will equalize his internal pressure to resist the water pressure and he'll be able to be just fine. I don't have a degree in marine biology, but there's no fucking way, right? Like, there's no way you could inhale enough water into your sinuses to somehow resist the pressure at 25,000 feet deep. There's just no fucking shot, right? Like, I just don't think so. But anyway, he does. He saves everyone. He then fights the main bad guy again down there, who, for some reason, lets Jason Statham live. Jason Statham passed out after saving everyone, and the main bad guy saves him, and he's like, I was in jail for 2 years because of you. I've been waiting for this moment to kill you. And it's like, brother, you could have just let him die in front of you. Like, I'm sure that probably would have been fulfilling for your revenge arc. Or, you know, if you wanted to be more hands-on, you could have, like, stabbed him while he was still passed out. But instead, he, like, wakes him up and then challenges him to some fisticuffs. Like, it's time to get pugilistic. Only he immediately cheats by bringing out a knife. So if you weren't going to actually, like, throw down with honor, why not just let him die? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, they have, like, a really lame fight against each other, which, of course, Jason Statham wins. They then get into a backup submarine and escape to the surface. And in the meantime, the main base is being raided by the CEO's cleanup squad, who's come like they're a military group who's come to kill everybody so they can keep the secret that they're mining rare earth minerals in the trenches. But because of that explosion kind of poking a hole in that, you know, protective barrier over the trench, 3 megalodons and the Kraken escape. A giant squid, basically the Kraken escapes to these 3 megalodons and like, uh-oh, we've got a problem. But it's not that big of a problem. So instead the military just keeps like shooting people and taking over the main base. And then there's 2 main people there that escape that are friends of Jason Statham. One of them's very cool. His name's DJ. He's got like a fucking Desert Eagle and he's got like pepper spray and a taser. And he's really cool. I think he's probably my favorite character in the movie. So he has some cool moments where he unleashes some martial arts and he starts shooting his Desert Eagle. Like, it's fun watching him. And this whole sequence is kind of enjoyable because finally it's snapping out of this tedious corporate conspiracy narrative that they were trying to drive home. Now we're just getting into some fun action. We have some megalodons that are now finally starting to do something like eat people. We have the Kraken who's on the loose now. So finally, you know, like an hour and 10 minutes into the movie, we're getting something entertaining. So anyway, I'm just going to press fast forward real quick here. Basically, all of the good guys escape the the main base. The Marines are still chasing them. And Jess, the woman on the inside, turns out was the lover of the bad guy at the deep sea. So he comes back, he gives her a kiss, and then the main evil CEO calls Jess, and she's like, Jess, we're going to need to give you a promotion. We're going to make you a hero here because the public's going to hear about this. Somehow. I don't know how, but they're like, we need to make you the hero here, Jess, so we're going to write you a story about how you saved everyone and saved the world and saved the planet. And Jess is like, that sounds great. And then she gets eaten by a megalodon who comes through the glass and kills her right in front of her boyfriend. And her boyfriend runs away. He's like, oh no, no, no. So that's how they get Jess out of there. She was a very important person in everything going wrong, and she probably only had like 4 scenes in total in the entire movie for maybe like 3 minutes of screen time. They killed her off in a really quick, comical way. That was self-aware, though. I'm very certain that was an on-purpose gag to kill her like that. So I don't have a problem with that. But anyway, now we're getting off the main base. We're towards the end of the movie. So the good guys are in a little boat, and they're going towards something called Fun Island. Didn't put any real effort into this, clearly. This movie really feels like it's the first product of the writer's strike. Like, this had to have just been written by people on their off time during lunch that weren't on strike. Like, there's no way an actual team of writers wrote this one. I really don't think so. Or if they did, they intentionally made it as unappealing to everybody as possible, because up until this point, it is a snooze fest, and they fucking called this place Fun Island. Didn't even bother to give it a name. So they're approaching Fun Island, like, everyone get out of the water! There's fucking megalodons coming, and it's a giant squid! And they're like, oh, it's a load of hooey. You're stupid. We're vacationing. We're having fun. We're not getting out of the water. And then all of the bad guys arrive to Fun Island as well, because they all deduced that it was going to Fun Island, so they go to Fun Island. And for some reason, the fucking evil CEO flies in on a helicopter to the island as well. The central point of the conflict, with all of the fucking prehistoric killing machines and all of the gunfights against the good and bad guys. For some reason, the evil CEO, who is totally safe and comfortable at her penthouse suite, flies here and just sits in the helicopter. She just wanted to be boots on the ground, like feel like she was part of the team, you know, part of the crew, part of the ship type shit. So she flies there in a fucking helicopter just to sit there and whine. Why? Why? Like, it doesn't even make sense in the context of the narrative. She has no reason to be there, but she goes out of her way to be there. And she's there like this, too. She basically fucking teleports there. Like, I don't know how she got there so quick. But she's there, and then she immediately dies. Because also escaping from the trench wasn't just megalodons and the kraken. It was like not turtle monsters, lizard monsters. So there are these like 4-legged little lizards with big teeth that crawl around. And they bite and kill her. They drag her away. So she does nothing. She flies to the island just to sit in the helicopter and die. But not before she has like 5 other horrible scenes where she's in the helicopter and she hears a noise. And she says to the pilot, she's like, Jenkins, go check on that. And it's like, lady, open your eyes. So like he turns off the helicopter and he goes out there and he dies eventually. But it zooms out from the helicopter, and there is a dead body right next to the helicopter, right next to the evil CEO, that somehow she didn't see? Like, she didn't know? And she's like, Jenkins, I don't know what that was. Go check on it. And it's like, if she just looked to her left, she would have seen a dead body. And how the fuck did someone die there without her knowing about it? Who was it? Sam Fisher on a stealth mission killed this guy? Like, it makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. And it's not just that body either. There was another body as well right next to the helicopter. So multiple people died around her, and she didn't know? Was she asleep? Is she lobotomized? Like, what the fuck? And then eventually she gets ambushed. Ambush is the wrong word, because the thing literally just slowly crawls up to her, jumps in the helicopter, and drags her away. And we never see her again, so she's presumed dead. So she had nothing to contribute to this fucking movie at all. The entire corporate conspiracy plotline has no real conclusion to it. It's all such trash. It's such trash. I'm kind of jumping all over the place now because the movie itself jumps all over the place. It becomes like an actual fever dream. So trying to remember anything from this film is a Herculean task. So the good guys are on the beach. They see the megalodons coming, and the megalodon starts eating people, starts killing people. The giant squid brings down an entire ship and starts, strangling people and killing them, drowning them, eating them. And I shit you not, 2 of the good guys go off on their own side quest, like into the jungle, because there's like a jungle on the beach there. So they go off into the jungle, and Jason Statham and another good guy and the child are still on the beach coming up with a plan. And for some fucking reason, Jason Statham tells the child to go to the lifeguard tower, which overlooks the water. You know, the place with the 3 megalodons and the giant squid that we're trying to escape from? He tells her to basically go into the fucking water. I'm surprised he didn't tell her to get on the surfboard and, like, start shredding some waves to have a little fun to take her mind off the stress. Like, what is that plan? Like, just tell her to go into the jungle. Like, the only thing that I could maybe try and rationalize here is I'm giving such a charitable fucking goodie bag to the team here, is that maybe Jason Statham thought it'd be more dangerous for her in the jungle because there were some gunshots from the bad guys fighting the lizard monsters. But even still, it's significantly lower odds of getting shot out in that jungle, which is a huge jungle, than it is putting her over the water with the megalodons and shit. But anyway, he basically just sends her to her death, like, as a prank. She doesn't die, spoiler. But he sends her to the most dangerous place possible. Meanwhile, he himself made little spears with bombs on them, which is something that we've seen him do before. And his plan is he's going to start throwing the spears with bombs on them at the megalodons, and he's going to save the day and be the big fucking hero. So the side quest that two of the people go on is to find the helicopter. They find the helicopter, no problem, lickety-split. And then they say it's out of fuel. How could it possibly be out of fuel? They just landed that bitch. It has been fucking planted on the ground and nothing else. How is it out of fuel? Did it just barely make the trip here? Did the lizard monsters, like, siphon the gas out of it because they're addicted to the gas? Like, how is it out of fuel? So then there's an intense moment where they're, like, scrambling to get the fuel hose, which is right next to the helicopter, conveniently. And they're like, all right, fill it up. And then the lizard monsters are, like, charging them. It's like, no, our precious nectar. We need the fuel. It tastes so good. So the lizard monsters are crawling after him. He starts spraying them with the gas, and they're like, ooh. So he's, like, holding them off with that, and then he fills the chopper in between, sprays them, and he's filling the chopper. And then they get on the chopper, and then one of the guys throws a match and blows up the lizards, and they fly the chopper away for literally 3 seconds before he immediately crashes. So, chopper crashes. One guy jumps out, one guy stays in, and you think he's dead, but he's not, because the helicopter, like, basically fucking explodes. The helicopter literally, like, fucking explodes. So you're like, oh, man, that guy died. Rest in peace, man. Godspeed. What a fucking patriot. But no, he's not dead. Like, somehow he survived it. So he's just, like, hanging out in there. So the guy who jumps off is like, I need to save him now. So he, like, swims over there, and he saves him, no problem. But anyway, I'll just finish up. I've been going on for so fucking long here. This is like an actual Moonfall incident here, trying to explain this absolutely disgusting, degenerate plot. So Jason Statham is throwing spears at the sharks, and this is when the movie is finally good. Watching the sharks actually kill people, well, as much as they show, which isn't much of anything, is enjoyable. It's fun. You know, shove popcorn in your face, turn your brain off, and just enjoy the silliness of it. It's fun. Jason Statham fighting the megalodons is fucking great. Him throwing these homemade spears with bombs on them is really cool. Blows the brains off of one of them after riding a gnarly-ass wave. So a megalodon jumps up, it misses him, slams down, creates a huge splash, which creates a huge wave, which Jason Statham, fucking Tony Hawk, ramps off of, throws a spear down beneath him, blows the brain off of one of the megalodons, bang, checkmate. Then Jason Statham crashes his jet ski. Oh, I forgot to mention he's on a jet ski, by the way. Actually, that's a very important part. I don't know what you were picturing without me saying jet ski, but yeah, he's on a jet ski. He's not, like, running on the water, you know. He's on a vehicle. But he crashes, and then he's on the dock, and then the bad guy is there as well. And the bad guy's got a light machine gun, and he's, like, shooting at him, and Jason Statham gets the edge. He stabs him in the leg. He takes his gun, and this is where we get our really cool one-liner moment. The bad guy's like, you've got your gun, you gonna shoot me? And he's like, don't need it. So Jason Statham drops the gun, which is so fucking dumb, by the way, because these are just sharks. You can shoot them, and it will hurt them. That gun would be invaluable as a resource to have. Having that gun would be so fucking helpful to protecting that child you care so much about, and everyone else on the beach that you seem to care a lot about, but for some reason it's like, yep, don't need it. I also forgot to mention that the child who went to the lifeguard tower for some reason decides that she wanted to try and save one person in particular, so she gets on a surfboard and swims out to her because she was drowning, and then she, like, leads her to the shore. So that was, like, a tense moment because, like, oh, was the megalodon gonna kill the kid? No, didn't happen, but just wanted to point that out. So he drops the gun, the bad guy's like, I knew you were too soft to shoot me, and it turns out this sneaky bad guy had another gun in his belt pocket holster. So he rips it out, and as he's going for it, Jason Statham kicks him into the mouth of a megalodon who's going by, who eats him. And Jason Statham's one-liner is, see you later, chum. So that was awesome. Yeah, and then I'll just go ahead and wrap up the synopsis here. Jason Statham starts banging a helicopter blade against the surface of the water to get the attention of the Megalodon to get him away from his friends. The Megalodon charges him. The Megalodon jumps up, about to eat Jason Statham, but Jason Statham drops back, points the helicopter blade straight up, and impales the Megalodon, killing it. Now, astute observers will have, well, not observers, astute listeners will have heard me mention that there were 3 Megalodons and a giant squid. So what happened to the other Megalodon and the giant squid? Well, that third Megalodon ate the giant squid, mauled it, because it wanted to. So that's how the giant squid dies. And then the third Megalodon is actually the one that escaped from captivity that they were trying to train. So the main trainer had his, like, clicking tool, and he gave it clicks to try and let the Megalodon know, hey, it's me, we're buddies, we're pals. And the Megalodon's like, ooh, geez, pardon me, you're right. I didn't recognize you, out here in the water like this. I'll be on my way now. So after a couple clicks, the Megalodon just swims past them and then leaves. That's where the movie ends. So, yeah, that was Meg 2. It was a fun, bad movie at the end, but everything before it was insufferably boring bad. So I didn't love it, basically. But yeah, probably the stupidest movie I've seen in a while. Definitely up there. But I do like the last 20 or 30 or so minutes, because finally it's what the movie should be. Fucking silly action with sharks and a giant squid. It's fun. So, yep, that's about it. See ya. I just saw Megalopolis. Wow. It was embarrassing sitting there watching that. I actually felt shame just being there witnessing that disaster of a movie. And to make it worse, insult to injury, I watched it right after Joker 2. So I just made the review for Joker 2. Spoiler, that movie was also bad. This movie was worse for sure, but man, what an unholy 1-2 combo that was. This was like a punch flurry that not even Mike Tyson could deliver, going back to back with Joker and then Megalopolis. So I took a shower before talking about Megalopolis because I know I'm going to get heated on this, because it's just so weird. This movie had over $100 million budget, and I don't get why. I don't get it. I already made a whole rant about that with these inflated budgets, but this film in particular it's so stupid to have a budget that big, because it's a movie devoid of a single element of a story. It has things that happen, sure, but it is such a fucking mess. This is a movie that smells of pretentiousness. It's very clear this wanted to be deeper than it is. This is a movie that wasn't made for any audience in particular. It was made for critics. It was made for people that love the smell of their own farts to pretend like they understand the subtle vicissitudes that the director was trying to convey. But in this film, it doesn't even work with that niche, because even critics don't like it. It's just not very good, at all. It is a disjointed, actual fever dream experience. So let's just dive into it. There's going to be spoilers, fair warning. This is a movie that I feel like it's almost impossible to spoil, because there isn't really a movie here. It's a collection of random shit that happens. It's like a collection of Francis Ford Coppola's memories from dreams that he had that he tries to piece together loosely here. Very similar to how the Rick and Morty anime does it. This is the Rick and Morty anime with $100 million budget. I'm also pretty sure every actor in here was just directed to be as weird as they possibly can. So Shia LaBeouf, for example, he's in this movie, and he dials his wackiness up to 11. So in the very beginning of the movie, they're going to this big press thing about something that they're opening, and Shia LaBeouf's there, and his uncle is also Caesar's uncle, and he's like, I heard you're doing the hanky-pank with your sisters. Can you stop that? And Shia LaBeouf's like, no, I won't stop that. So he's doing this, and then he grabs the railing, and he kicks his feet up. He goes, and then he puts himself in a dress in the next scene, also still doing those mannerisms and stuff. And also, Adam Driver as Caesar, someone I thought was supposed to be this cavalier, genius guy, he's kind of the same way. So at that same press event, he's there and he's giving a monologue, and he is actually a Reddit mod. So Caesar's character, I am 100% sure, is inspired by the quintessential Reddit mod that everybody pictures in their head. The way he carries himself, the way he talks, he's always some of this. And like the way he speaks to people is so fucking cringe. Like actual Discord admin level shit. So like there's a scene where the mayor's daughter shows up and he talks to her. He's like, ugh, Jiminy Christmas. He doesn't say Jiminy Christmas, but he scoffs. He's like, ugh, you, of course, you've wandered into my quarters. I'd prefer if you weren't here. I don't like to dawdle with the riffraff. I prefer to carry myself in conversations with those that like to think, so we can have intellectual discussions on important subjects. So if you wouldn't mind excusing yourself from my abode, I would be much appreciative of that. Why don't you go see yourself back to the club and get out? And he says that, by the way. That wasn't verbatim, but he literally says club like that. It's awful. It's terrible to listen to. But I will say, it is fun bad pretty often, actually. I did find myself audibly saying, what the fuck, with a smile on my face and giggling occasionally at how horrible what I was watching is. Because it's really shitty, but sometimes in an unintentionally entertaining way. It tries to be so profound and falls flat on its fucking face. So let's begin. I don't think the movie is dog shit out of the gate. In fact, I actually quite like the visuals in this film. Like the style of it, I think is interesting. But by the time it gets to the halfway point, you're already so lost in the sauce here that you have no clue what's happening. So it all just becomes kind of worthless anyway. But I do think there is a style here that is unique. However, the visuals really are hit or miss. There are times where it looks really good. Like it seems like, hey, this is a big budget production. And then there's times where it actually looks like they filmed it at our warehouse in front of our green screen. Like there are some of the worst green screen moments in here that I've seen in a modern film. Like it makes some of DC's biggest stinkers for CGI look like award winners. I don't know what happened and why there's some incredible visuals here and then some absolute like Adobe After Effects first year attempt like visuals. I don't get it. So something definitely went awry in the pipeline here for the production, but overall I do think the style is eye-catching. Now, the beginning of the film isn't super dog shit. It's not like Turbo Cheeks or anything. It actually is almost cohesive. They introduce our two main characters that we're going to be seeing a lot of. It's Adam Driver playing Caesar, who is like this genius architect who's found like the god particle basically called Megalon. And it's Giancarlo Esposito playing Cicero, who is the mayor who does not like Caesar. They butt heads constantly. And the film, like, it's not like it's a mess because I'm too stupid to understand it. I know that's a lot of cope people like to try in a film like this, where they like stick their pinky out. The plebeians just simply couldn't understand this high art. What a shame. I understand it because I'm enlightened. That's not the case here. I actually think this movie is very easy to understand on the themes it's trying to get across in the beginning, where it actually had a semblance of a narrative. In the second half of the film, there's nothing. There's actually nothing. We'll get to that in a minute. It is a fucking battlefield of nonsense. But in the beginning, I think it's pretty clear. It's introducing characters that have different ideologies. So like there's a reporter who keeps fucking her way up the ladder, trying to get more and more power, more and more wealth. She has like a fling with Caesar. Caesar's somewhat of like a playboy to a certain extent. He's like this genius, cavalier kind of guy. Cicero is really against what Caesar represents, which is change. He is trying to think about the future, whereas Cicero is focused on the present. And that's the big clash of ideals. So this is very clearly inspired by like the fall of Rome. They drill that home. They shove that down your fucking throat. Like the location here is called New Rome. It's basically just New York though. So the whole idea is the dreamer, the architect here, Caesar, wants to bring change. But the rich and powerful around him, they're pretty okay being stagnant and focusing more on like the present and just keeping people like occupied as opposed to getting ready for what comes next. Caesar has an uncle who's like the richest person in the fucking universe. His name's Hamilton, and he's beyond absurdly wealthy. So Caesar also has a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of influence. And the whole idea is he wants to use the Megalon particle to make Megalopolis, which will be a utopia, which is all about the future and getting the next generation ready for what comes. And also, Caesar has a superpower. He can stop time. Not only can he stop time, he can fully manipulate it. He controls time. And you'd think that'd be like an important component of this story. It's not. He does it maybe 3 times. And he really only does it when he wants to watch a building fall once. and then the other 2 times he does it is to kiss a girl. Oh, and then he does it one more time where he just shows that he can do it. He never actually uses it for anything. It is completely worthless, meaningless. I don't even know why they bothered giving him a superpower, other than what it represents. So here's where we get to, again, the double meanings and shit that like to try and get woven in here unsuccessfully because the film's just very underwhelming. The idea, I believe, that they're trying to convey with Caesar stopping time is one that they do kind of like hammer into you at one point, because his love interest comes in after he's lost this power due to self-doubt. She kind of explains that art, every piece of art, uses time, manipulates time, controls time. Music turns time into rhythm. Architecture freezes time in these buildings, this and that. So the idea here with his superpower isn't necessarily that he's has the ability to control time, even though he literally does. It's more about the representation that his vision, his art, is the architecture and the ability to stop time with his creation. Now, his love interest, the reason she even gets interested in him in the first place is she happens to see him stop time. She doesn't get stopped. Everyone else around him gets frozen in time. She doesn't. She's able to like process it and like, wow, he can control time. Most people will be really impressed by that. And the idea here that they're trying to get across, I believe, is that she can see his artistic vision, and he is able to understand that she gets the vision, which is why he falls in love with her and her him. And this all would be fine and dandy if there was anything that comes from it. Like, they set up this shit, it's not that subtle, it's not very deep, it's all kind of like obvious, I think, for the most part, and they don't even do anything with it. It's just like a bunch of different fucking ideas that don't work together that get thrown in here. It's a waste of time. And it introduces so many plot elements that never play a role in this. So like the superpower, for example, it doesn't actually play a role in this at all. There's also a satellite that they introduce in the beginning that's about to like fall into the earth and maybe be a problem, but then they deem it's not that big of a deal because it's hitting somewhere kind of remote. And then eventually towards the end of the movie, here comes the satellite. It's changed course. It's going to hit New Rome directly. No. And then it hits New Rome, blows up like 3 buildings, and then it's never addressed again. Like, and then also there's a plot line where Caesar's wife died, and for some reason he was accused of murdering her. And Cicero, the mayor, was actually the DA at the time trying to pin murder on him. He was eventually acquitted of that. And then there's like this scene where he's buying flowers for his wife, except his wife's dead, so it's like kind of all in his head, but it shows like he still loved his wife. And I thought that was going to be a big component of this, but it's not. Turns out like he wasn't the best husband really, and his wife ended up like driving off a bridge and dying, and then something mysteriously happened to the body, and they accuse Caesar of like taking the body, except he didn't take the body. It was actually some kind of big cover up. And then Cicero, when he finds out that Caesar's like, you know, impregnated his daughter, he's like, listen, Caesar, I love my daughter, and here's a red envelope that has my confession about your wife's body, which is never addressed again. Also, his wife's body never mattered in the plot. Also, his wife never mattered in the plot. The biggest thing that happened with his wife is where he like really offhandedly mentions that he found Megalon by trying to bring his wife back to life, and then that's it. Then he goes right back to making out and impregnating the mayor's daughter. All of these things get introduced, but don't actually mean anything or do anything. Like, there's a whole scene where the reporter that was fucking Caesar ends up marrying his uncle for his money, and they throw this big wedding at a coliseum where they have like wrestlers wrestling, and then they have this girl do a musical number, and she's like the virgin that New Rome sponsors. Like, she's a New Rome enforced virgin. So during this wedding celebration, there's a moment where she has a musical number, and then it leads to people like donating money for her virginity fund or something. Like, I don't even know what they're bidding on. Like, they start bidding. It gets up to like $100 million just to give her money for being a virgin. Like, it makes no sense. And then all of a sudden, Shia LaBeouf's in this movie, acting like an absolute crazy person, which is fine, I guess, but it doesn't do anything. He's just like weird for the sake of being weird. It doesn't actually do anything for the plot. But anyway, Shia LaBeouf comes up with this nefarious plot to try and like hurt Caesar, so he deepfakes a video of him taking that girl's virginity, except she was underage, so then he starts to like get tried for like statutory rape, except then it turns out that the girl's 23, and then like the charges immediately get dropped. And then the whole thing with that girl, Caesar the virgin, whatever, none of that ever gets addressed outside of the 10 minutes that became a plot point. It's like Francis Ford Coppola completely forgot it was even written in here. Like, it's just this complete nonsensical fucking dumpster fire of things that happen. And I can't even say happen, because a lot of things don't even really happen. Like, almost nothing happens. It is impossible to piece together what the actual plot is past the halfway point. And I'd say a little before the halfway point, it goes completely unhinged and off the rails. It falls apart, and it was barely even held together in the first place. But at least there was a semblance of where things were going. But then it just becomes indecipherable. It's like Finnegan's Wake visually. Just complete gibberish. So, like, the plot's moving forward. Eventually, like, Shia LaBeouf's character, Claudio, he starts leading a movement that's, trying to push Caesar out, push the mayor out. He's leading the charge and like, getting into politics. Things aren't going super well for Caesar, who gets shot by a child as, like, an assassination attempt that Claudio was behind. But he survives because Megalon got fused with his skull, which regrew his whole brain and his whole face. So, like, it's literally a god particle. It's like a magic particle that can just do anything, including building utopia. The girl who married the uncle then starts having sex with Claudio. So, like, there's this whole uncomfortable scene. The girl is played by Aubrey Plaza, by the way. And so Aubrey Plaza goes up to Shia LaBeouf, and she's like, your grandfather, we need to steal his money. You're a naughty boy, aren't you? And he's like, yes, Auntie Wow. Her name is Wow Platinum. That's the character's name, Wow Platinum. And this scene goes on for way too long, an uncomfortably long period of time, where she's like, does my ass look good in this? And he's like, yeah. And she said, no, yes, Auntie Wow. Say that. And he's like, yes, Auntie Wow. And then she, like, shoves her whole pussy in his face, and he starts eating her out, saying, thanks, Auntie Wow. And then she's like, do you want to fuck me? And he's like, yes, Auntie Wow. And then she goes over her plan to get Claudio to become the interim CEO to force out Hamilton so they can have all of his infinite wealth. So then they're together. And then they do execute that plan, and it kicks Hamilton out somehow. And then Hamilton has a heart attack, except he's faking it. So he's, like, in bed, and Claudio and Wow Platinum pay him a visit. And a lot of people, I think, talked about this scene because someone mentioned it on stream like 2 days ago. So this is the scene where Hamilton's in bed, and they're around him, and he's still pretending to be, like, injured to a certain extent from the heart attack. So he says, one more thing. Do you like my boner? Because there's, like, something sticking up in the sheets. And like, do you like my boner? And then he takes the sheet off, and it's a little bow and arrow, like Cupid's bow and arrow. So he shoots a little arrow, which hits Aubrey Plaza in the heart, instantly killing Wow Platinum. And then he shoots 2 more arrows into the ass of Shia LaBeouf as he runs away. And he says, it's the closing bell, you Wall Street slut. Something like that before firing the arrow, killing Aubrey Plaza. It's bad. Like, it's bad, but like I said, that's kind of, like, fun shitty. Do you like my boner? Like, I mean, it got a little laugh out of me, the absurdity of it. Maybe that's the whole point of the movie, is just to be so incomprehensibly absurd that you're supposed to find enjoyment of it. But you're not really laughing with the movie, you're kind of laughing at it. Because it's a disaster. This movie is a disaster. So, like, even Megalopolis itself, what it is, like the utopia that Caesar is building, it's a fucking amusement park. He is literally making an amusement park. So you see Megalopolis at the end, like, he gets it made, and everyone moves to Megalopolis, and somehow it's supposed to save the world, and somehow the mayor, who's been really adamant against it, thinking that Caesar's like this evil bad guy, this can never work, whatever, he ends up going there, and he's like, wow, this place is fucking incredible. Wow, look at that. Yeah, this is going to save the world. But shake my hand and tell me that you're going to build diligently or something. He's like, yeah, of course. And the place is actually like little roller coasters. So you ride around on Pokeballs on these golden highways. Oh, actually, they're kind of like the little pods out of Jurassic World. You ride around on those in little golden highways, like tiny little highways, and all of the buildings are like seashells. It actually kind of reminds me of the concept art for Akon City. You remember that like scam Akon tried to run? It actually kind of looks like that. I think they took design elements from Akon City for Megalopolis. It's so silly. Like somehow this is the utopia. This is what saves the world. Like what? It was so dumb. Man, I could go on and on about like the insanity of this film. I just can't believe this got made, and I am even more stunned that this had over $100 million budget. What a waste of money. So I know it's not doing well financially, so everyone's already made the joke calling it Megalopolis, but man, it really is. This shit sucks. Like, I don't get it, what they were going for. Like, I get in the beginning what they tried to set up with, like, the pretty obvious imagery and, like, the ideologies that they introduced. Like, I get that, but then it just doesn't even follow any of that. Like, it doesn't even go down that path. It's just a complete mess. So, is Megalopolis worth watching? No. But if you like fun bad movies, this might be one to stream when it comes out. I think it is fun bad. I think it's more oftentimes enjoyably shitty than it is boringly shitty. Like, there was never a moment in the film where I was like, man, this is like unbearable to sit through. I was always like, okay, this is kind of dragging, but I know there's going to be something so stupid that it'll probably like breathe life back into this. And I was usually right. It is fun bad pretty often. So if you like shittily entertaining films, this one might be for you. But I would not recommend paying money to go see it under any circumstance. That's about it. So yeah. Jinkies. That was not good. I had a couple friends of mine see this movie before I did, and they all hated it. And I'd already seen a lot of the buzz online about it not being very good. And I just thought to myself that it couldn't possibly be as bad as people were saying. But hooey! It's really just not good. It's a shockingly confusing fumble of a sequel. Like, the most fun I had going to see the new Joker movie was in the car ride to and from it because I was listening to Warhammer 40k lore on the Horus Heresy. And just listening to that was better than seeing Joker Folie Deux. Fair warning, I'm going to be getting into the nitty gritty. I will be dumping spoilers on you out the wazoo for this film just to give you my full thoughts on all of it. It is confusing how badly this movie missed the mark. Like, I know sequels are never really going to be as good as the original. That's always such a tall order. Like, that is an almost impossible Herculean task. But this one is way off. Like, it is just not close. And I wasn't surprised that there's so many musical numbers in it. That was well established a long time ago that this was going to be like a pseudo-musical to a certain extent. I'm not a fan of musicals in any way, shape, or form, really. There's a few of them I like, but overall, it's not one of my favorites. But I was willing to go in with an open mind if it was a good movie and if the musical numbers somehow added to it, but they don't. The music's fine, like I don't think the music is bad or anything, but the musical numbers actually just feel like filler content to try and distract you from how choppy and clusterfucky the movie itself is. Like, it feels like they were a big afterthought that they needed to just start inserting to fill space. Because this isn't a sequel that was planned. The Joker movie was supposed to be a one-off, but it made so much money that they came back for a sequel. And it really does feel like a soulless cash grab. It doesn't have a story to tell. It doesn't have a point. There's some cool scenes, and a couple of the musical sequences have some really impressive visuals, but they don't add anything, and a lot of the musical numbers don't even tie into the scene that preceded them. They're totally isolated in Arthur's head, like in his fantasy, and they don't actually even relate to anything narratively, so it just feels kind of worthless. Not all of them, but I'd say probably the majority of them don't actually even relate to what's happening plot-wise. They just are a random musical number. Some of them do relate and they're okay, like they're not awful, but I just think it would have been more effective if they just talked instead of sang at each other. That happens a lot. So like Arthur will be mid-conversation with somebody and then he'll just like break out into song. And I come and I cry and I look in the mirror and I say, who is that guy? Because society is seeming on the brink And when I sleep with an itchy ass, my finger will stink. And it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, it becomes unbearable how often that happens in this movie. By the 8th or 9th musical sequence like that, I got up to go take a tinkle break, and I heavily contemplated just going home. I don't want to exaggerate and say this is like the worst movie I've ever seen, because it's not. It's not even the worst movie of the year, not even close. That honor still goes to Borderlands movie. It's also not the worst sequel ever made, but it is probably the most disappointing sequel I've seen. It just doesn't have a point. And these musical numbers just feel like bloat to try and take your attention away from how weak the story is. This isn't really a Joker movie, it's more of like a Harley Quinn origin story, which would have been fine if it was good. It's just not. It also feels like Todd Phillips has regrets and isn't proud of the first movie, because a lot of what happens in this movie is undoing a lot of what the first one did. So the Joker's not even really in this movie. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's mainly Arthur Fleck just being sad. Like Arthur Fleck going through bad things. He is completely regressed into just the old Arthur Fleck, who doesn't have that Joker persona anymore and that like confidence or anything. But I do want to be clear, I still think Joaquin Phoenix does an incredible job with this character. I just think the writing around him was significantly weaker on this rodeo. Lady Gaga, I also think does a really good job as Harley Quinn, but it's just really frustrating how it feels like they just ham-fisted musical numbers in here because Lady Gaga is such a good singer. So pretty much every scene she's in, she's singing. Like, I don't think she really got a chance to shine and show, like, her acting prowess, and I think she's a great actress. Instead, she just is forced to just sing every time she's on screen. So I think that just takes away from the character as well. But anyway, the Joker is not really a character in this movie. Even when he's in the makeup and trying to puff out his chest and put on the act of being the Joker, it is unrecognizable from how it was in the first movie. It feels so forced, and in this movie, the Joker's just kind of a fucking moron. Like, he's actually just kind of an idiot. So, a big component of this is him going to trial. And you've seen the trailers, I'm sure. He ends up representing himself. And I thought that was going to be the turning point where most of the movie had been back and forth on Arthur and Joker. Harley is obsessed with Joker, not Arthur. She doesn't care about Arthur that much. It's the Joker that she loves. And when that happens, and he fires his lawyer in the middle of the courtroom, I thought it was going to be like, oh, he's going to go into that Joker we saw at the end of the first movie. He doesn't. And really, the entire courtroom drama section of this movie, which is a huge piece of it, is just so flat. Because it's a complete steamroll. Like, we saw everything that happened in the first Joker movie, but a good chunk of this trial is them just telling you what all of us already saw from the first movie. So it just becomes kind of wasteful. The only good moment of the trial is when Gary takes the stand. That back and forth between Gary and the Joker is by far the best part of this whole movie. And it doesn't last that long. Everything else in the courtroom is just really underwhelming. There's nothing the Joker or Arthur or his team can really do to get him out of that situation, so you're just seeing him get fucking slapped by the consequences of his actions, which could have been fine. Like, I think that's a fine narrative point to go down, but there needed to be something in there to make it worth watching, because basically what we're getting is like a lore dump, a recap of what we've already seen. And even when Arthur tries to slip into the Joker in the courtroom, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. Like, he doesn't make any arguments, he doesn't even like try and defend himself or make some kind of statement or anything at all. He just talks in a circle, ineffectively. And then he imagines himself killing some people, but that's it. Like, it just doesn't work. I didn't think it worked at all when he tried to be the Joker here. Especially when you consider that a good chunk of this film is dedicated to try and get the audience to buy into the idea that Arthur and the Joker are separate, like it's a split personality. Like, that's his defense's argument that they try and make to help him out in court. And they really try and make you buy into that idea. They even have like an animation that plays at the beginning of the movie. And that video is supposed to try and, like, I don't know, kind of push you down that thought process. But that is so stupid. That doesn't work at all because you've seen the first movie. Like, you've already seen the first movie. Why are we even trying that? It wasn't executed very well. Like, that whole idea of trying to separate these two, it just doesn't work. It's pretty poorly done. I will say the thing that I thought had the most promise was Harley Quinn. Since a lot of this is basically her origin story, they did set up some interesting ideas. Like how she's kind of just manipulating the Joker. Like, she lies to him a lot in order to get close to him and kind of goad him in certain directions, because that's what she fell in love with, was the Joker and like the idea of the Joker. So she's constantly like manipulating him, and it's, I think, could have been an interesting dynamic if it wasn't always just in sing-song fashion, and if it wasn't always just like hammered home what she's doing towards the end. And the ending of this movie super sucks. The ending of this movie is like actually atrocious. So the courtroom drama is starting to wrap up. He's clearly not winning. He eventually then goes to the jury and starts talking about how, you know, the Joker's not real. It was never real. It's always been Arthur. Which is like that big moment, like, oh, he's been faking it this whole time. There is no like second, you know, personality or anything. The Joker's, it's a complete fucking ruse. It's a sham. It's always just Arthur. And while this is going on, a bomb goes off at the courthouse. That's that came out of nowhere. This whole movie doesn't have any like action per se. There's a couple things that happen in a fantasy where like the Joker gets shot or the Joker hits the judge with a gavel. Like, that all happens in a fantasy, but in the actual reality of the film, nothing like that happens at all. So this bomb explosion comes out of fucking nowhere, like a jump scare. So bomb blows up in the courthouse. Joker escapes. He just walks right out, and he's going to Harley, who doesn't really want to see him, because after what Joker said about the Joker's not real, it's only Arthur, she storms out of the courtroom. And she doesn't return his call. He starts fucking singing to her over voicemail for the millionth time, just another goddamn song, and she ignores it. He leaves the courthouse. He gets picked up by some like Joker super fans who get him, put him in the car, and then he runs away from them to try and find Harley. Before he gets out of their car, though, there's statements made by the two people in Joker makeup about how like the whole city's gonna burn, this and that, and it seems like Arthur Fleck has like regret and doesn't agree with that. He gets out of the car and starts running. And I think that moment, and he's also getting chased by the Joker's like, we still love you, we love you, Joker. I think that's a moment that's supposed to be, it's very on the nose, supposed to be for the audience to be like, oh, people are relating to the most extreme, unhinged parts of the Joker and using it as a platform for violence type thing. And Arthur is running away from that, trying to find Harley to start a life of love with her. When he finally finds her on the iconic staircase, she wants nothing to do with him. She tells him that it's all just a fantasy. It's always been the Joker that she loves, not Arthur, and he threw away that fantasy, so the Joker's not real. It's only Arthur, and she leaves. It's all just a fantasy. Get the fuck out of here, Buster. Then he gets taken back into jail, thrown back in Arkham, and then he gets told he has a visitor, walks down a hallway, and this random dude who we'd only seen a couple of glimpses of throughout the movie, like looking on like menacingly throughout the film occasionally, talks to him in the hallway asking if he can tell him a joke. And he's like, all right, yeah, if it's a quick joke. And he's like, I'll make it quick. And the joke basically just ends with him saying, gets what he deserves, and then shanks him like 5 or 6 times, and the Joker dies. Arthur Fleck collapses and dies. And in the background, it's blurred to make it really mysterious and very cinematic. The guy who stabbed him, this random fucking psychopath, is now cutting his face in the shape of a smile. And it's, I believe, alluding to Heath Ledger's Joker, who had the scars in the shape of a smile. And if that is the case, I am pretty sure that's what it's trying to do there. If that is what it's actually aiming for, that is just insultingly shit. That, it doesn't fit at all. Like, you can start picking apart, like, the timeline till the cows come home, but even the context of this film, it just doesn't fucking fit at all. It is a terrible conclusion. Even setting aside the absurdity of this alluding to Heath Ledger's Joker, how this psychopath is now going to take on the mantle of the Joker and be what we saw in The Dark Knight, even setting aside the lunacy of that, this movie actually just goes nowhere. It ends in the exact same place it started without really much changing, and he just dies in a hallway to a random guy. There is no comeuppance for some bad people in this film. For example, the guards. Towards the end of the movie, there is a scene where the guards snap on Arthur after seeing him in the courtroom. They assault him, brutalize him, and there is an implied rape of Arthur by the guards. And the guards just kind of tip their hat to him at the end. That's it. They don't get any like punishment for that or anything, which just, that's not a satisfying conclusion. Arthur is a bad guy. The Joker is a villain. But I don't think, like, it's necessarily the right call to have other villains beat him up rape him, and those villains are fine at the end of the movie. Like, there should have been a moment where the Joker comes out and he kills those guards for that, or something to that effect. Like, it's just, this movie, it really feels like Todd Phillips hated the character he made, so wanted to unmake the character like as best he could. It's just so weird, the direction this movie goes. And beforehand, I know Todd tried to say that he believed music was like an integral part to exploring Arthur as like the complex character. I'm calling baloney on that. That's some fiddlesticks. No shot, because the music doesn't really explore him. The music doesn't really explore anything. It feels like it's here because Lady Gaga is here, and she's so good at singing. The music, like I said, only sometimes even connects to what we're even seeing in the plot. Other times it's just totally isolated. Like, yes, it is a look inside of Arthur's psyche occasionally, but it doesn't contribute anything. It doesn't help with the understanding of the character or how Arthur sees himself, really, outside of like a couple of isolated instances of these sequences. Otherwise, they're just musicals for the sake of it. And it just feels worthless. It's just so odd to take it in that direction. What I truly believed happened here is Todd Phillips made a great movie with the Joker one. That movie was incredible. I liked it a lot. Most people liked it a lot. It's a very well done film. And that movie made significantly more money than Todd and the executives were expecting. So he got that call, offered a big check, and said, fuck it. Fine. I'll phone in a sequel. And he did. But instead of just doing what most people do for an uninspired sequel where they kind of just repeat what the first one did a little worse for the second, he took it in the most unconventional route ever just to be quirky. Like, he took it in this completely different direction and did it terribly. Again, it's not like the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst sequel I've ever seen, but it is the most confusing one because there's no reason for it to exist. A, it's there just because money, a lot of money from the first one. We need the second one to hopefully get even more money from those piggy banks. And B, why in the fuck does it seem to have such a grudge against the first movie? Like I said multiple times now, it actually just feels like they took that character and broke it. Like, actually just like completely shat on what they built up for this character in the first movie. Instead of expanding on it, growing it, or even exploring it in a different way, they just redid it and wiped their ass with most of what they tried to establish in the first. It just doesn't make sense. And even when it has like an interesting idea or two, like there were a couple moments in this film where I was like, oh, this is building up to something that could be cool. And then it goes to an unrelated musical number, kills its own momentum, comes back, and it's in a totally different spot. The movie's just choppy. Like, it is just choppy. So even when they have something that's starting to develop, it ruins it with a musical and then never comes back to that momentum it was building. So like it just doesn't work very well. There's a couple of things to like about it, like with the performances of some of the actors here for sure. There are some very cool visual moments. Like I said, in the courtroom with Gary and Arthur, that is a very strong scene. Like, that whole sequence is very powerful. But outside of like these very rare instances of this film, there's just not a whole lot to like. So yeah, I don't really give number reviews to things anymore. I always just answer the question, is it worth watching? And for Joker Folie à Deux, Joker 2, no. I don't think it's worth watching. It actually just feels like a waste of time. It feels like this is a film that has no reason to exist. It never wanted to exist, but had to because of money. So I don't think it's worth watching, and that's disappointing. It's really about it. So yeah. We've all wasted money on something at some point in our lives. I know I'm guilty of that. I once spent $200 on a pocket trumpet that I never learned how to play, and then an additional like $150 on a theremin that I only tried to play a couple of times and never mastered. And these two items now just haunt my shelves in the closet. Big waste of money, and I do regret it. Of course, this is going to vary from person to person, but I can say with a high level of confidence you have not wasted as much money as Universal did for the rights to The Exorcist. 400 million clams in order to buy the rights for The Exorcist to make a trilogy out of it, and the first movie just dropped called Exorcist Believer. And I'm here to tell you after seeing it that this was the worst money ever spent. They blew their load with 400 mil and had nothing left over for writers, so they really relied on ChatGPT to scrap something together. This is laughable. This movie did not make me a believer in the future of this franchise. It made me a believer in true evil in Hollywood to allow this type of fucking terrible blemish to exist. This film is insulting to the legacy of The Exorcist. It is by far the most influential horror movie ever made, The Exorcist I'm speaking about, and to have this movie now coming out, even though I know the second and third Exorcist movies aren't exactly the best, this is so much worse. They could have spent $400 million for the rights to Jimmy Neutron and made a Hugh Neutron spinoff, and it probably would have been higher quality than this. And they had self-reflection on, like, the importance here of what they were making. Jason Blum of Blumhouse, who was a producer on this film, even said that it's the riskiest movie he's ever made. Just because it's so expensive, usually the bar to success on everything we do because it's inexpensive is incredibly low. For The Exorcist, it's high. And that's an understatement. It's extremely high. And man, did it fall flat on its fucking face. Now let's dive in. I'd like to explain why I think this movie's so bad and perhaps the biggest waste of money I've ever seen from a Hollywood gamble. So, I'll go ahead and tell you there's two compliments I can give this movie. I'll start off with the good here before getting you with the knuckle sandwich with the bad. The good. It has an interesting premise. It has a couple of interesting ideas. And best of all, it's not that long, so it ends pretty quickly. That's, of course, relatively speaking, it's about 2 hours long, but by modern movie standards, that's pretty quick these days. Everything wants to be like 2.5, 3 hours all of a sudden, so at least this is refreshing that it's only 2. Those are the only compliments I give it, and one of them is just that it ends, so you can leave and forget that you ever watched it. The biggest sin this movie commits, though, is being a fucking snooze fest. It is just unforgivably boring. If I didn't drink some gamer subs before going to the theater, I probably would have fallen asleep there trying to stay awake through this one. So I'm going to shout out Gamersups, because big W from Gamersups here. I had some titty milk, which is one of their flavors, before going. I know if I just say titty milk cold turkey like that, you won't know what I'm talking about. It's not real breast milk, that's just one of the flavors Gamersups offers, and it's my personal favorite one. I highly recommend Gamersups. I fucking love it. If you want to get some free samples, you can click the link in the description below. It's completely free, not even a shipping cost. Gamersups will just send out a bunch of samples for you to try, and you will most likely enjoy them. And yeah, if you also just want to use my code, it's code MOIST at gamersups.gg in order to get a discount on any of the items you might want to purchase. So big thanks to Gamersups. I am going to be getting into spoilers here, so this is your warning. I can't talk about what makes this movie so bad without some spoilers. Sorry in advance, but this is your warning. The film's plot. It follows a widower who has a daughter who really wants to meet her mother. And one day, after school, her and a friend go into the woods to perform a ritual to try and communicate with her mom. Obviously, things go south. It leads to a possession. And instead of one person being the victim of a demonic possession, it's both girls. They both become possessed. And I do think that's an interesting idea. Albeit, I don't think it's the most creative idea like some people are making it out to be. All it did was say, what if instead of one, there's two? What if we just... 2 of them! It's not exactly a galaxy brain scheme. It's just they added another character to be possessed. And then the other character, that's not the widower's daughter, is kind of an afterthought. In fact, her entire family is an afterthought. You probably won't even remember their names by the time the film's over, because they give them no time to develop, and they have nothing to do here except fucking endlessly whine. They're just these personality-less drones, like these forgettable side characters that pop up occasionally in Skyrim to say a few lines before going along their way all robotic, never to be seen again. That's that entire family. So it feels like, why even bother with 2 possessions if you're only going to focus on one of the families? It just doesn't make a ton of sense. I do think the dynamic of a double whammy possession could have worked well, and it does to a certain extent sometimes work decently here, if they had just given it more care. Like, there's definitely potential here that wasn't realized at all, really. But, like, there were a couple of decent moments with the 2 possessions, especially towards the end. I could see some glimmer of possibility with this idea. Aside from the lip syncing sometimes, it makes it very clear that it's dubbed. So if you've seen The Exorcist, if you've seen any fucking possession movie, you know how it goes. They'll have a demon voice coming out of the child's body, and in here, sometimes the lips don't match up with the words, so it really feels like a poorly dubbed Team 4-star moment sometimes. Like, how could you even let some of that slide? It's very obvious. Also, speaking of things without a purpose in this film, they brought back Ellen Burstyn from the original Exorcist, so it shows you that this is a direct sequel. And unfortunately, Ellen Burstyn has nothing to do here. They did her dirty. It's downright disrespectful because she has no role to play in this film. If you took her out, the entire film plays out exactly the same. Not a single iota of difference, whether she's here or not. It's purely as a point at the screen cameo moment, like, oh, I know her. That's it. Nothing else. It's pathetic, really. It feels like it's misleading advertisement because she's in the trailer quite a bit, but she's not in the movie at all. So I already gave you the spoiler warning. All she does is serve as a brief side quest where Victor is trying everything to get his daughter back and out of the hands of the demon. He eventually finds her through, searching around. Victor then goes up to her, fills her in on the situation. We learn that she and her daughter Reagan aren't on good terms and she hasn't seen her daughter for a really long time. She agrees to help Victor and goes to one of the girls' houses, Catherine, and attempts to save her from the demonic presence. But in doing so, Catherine stabs both of her eyes. So now she's blind. And then that's it. We don't see her again until the very end. She exists solely in this film to get her eyes popped like bloody water balloons. And that's it. It just feels like such a waste to even have her here. This feels like a role they wrote before she had committed, so they wanted to make sure that if she said no to the role, it wouldn't change the outcome of the film, so they just gave her a throwaway role to play here, which is just, it's super dumb. It really is. But I wanted to point that out because that really stood out to me. There's just so many characters in here that actually don't serve a purpose. I don't know why they're even bothering to put them in the film in the first place. But anyway, her eyes getting stabbed is one of the very few times that something even happens in this movie. I mentioned that it's boring, but I mean it is turbo boring at times. It had me wishing I was back in college listening to a professor lecture me about the Krebs cycle. That would have been more entertaining than some of these sections of the film. Now, the beginning of the film is spent trying to develop the characters a little bit. It's kind of like two different movies slammed together. The first half is trying to find where the girls went and what could have happened. The second half is then all of your generic horror movie tropes fucking crashed together haphazardly. And the first half I've seen get a lot of praise. You won't see it get any praise from me, though. I think everything it wanted to do in the first half was not done very well. I think the intro is good, but then it doesn't really get you hooked on these character relationships. Victor and Angela only share brief exchange before Angela and Catherine go into the woods and go missing. And Catherine's family is basically just fucking ghosts here. You barely even see them. And when you do, they do nothing but just go, ooh, and then you just, forget about them. But, there's not a whole lot of time spent developing these characters before they go missing. Now, of course, there's some development while they're looking for them and searching, and when they do eventually find them, trying to piece together what exactly happened. But I just don't really see where people are coming from when they're talking about how great this first half was. Because I just don't think it was done very well at all. It could have been done much better. But anyway, let's start talking about the worst parts of the film, and that's its attempt at horror. I say attempt because I think it just fails completely at delivering anything that even resembles horror. It tries to rely on jump scares, but doesn't know how to do them. It's like they don't know what a jump scare is. So what'll be happening is characters will be having just a normal conversation or normal things happening, and then all of a sudden it'll just flash a couple of images at you like you're playing the Scary Maze game from back in 2009 or whatever. They'll just be talking, and then all of a sudden, scary image. Ooh, look at this creepy figure, and here's kind of a loud noise. But they were mid-conversation. It's not like a jump scare. They were actively talking, and now all of a sudden there's just a weird thing on screen and a louder noise. That doesn't startle anybody. They weren't well-executed jump scares, and executing a jump scare is the easiest thing in the world. Just go silent, and then bang, huge noise, crash fucking 10 trash cans together with this huge noise and the creepy face or something. But they don't even do that. They just randomly, I guess maybe bad editing is to blame, but randomly just start putting a couple of flash creepy images with a slightly louder sound. So the jump scares don't even work, and that's the only thing it ever really does for horror. The suspense doesn't exist in this movie. There's no such thing. Like I said, I do think the child actresses do a decent job of like looking creepy and like moving around creepy occasionally, but even that isn't utilized very much because they're very quickly bound to chairs and then spend like 35 minutes being bound to chairs as people recite prayers around them. I'll get to that in a moment though. But yeah, I really don't know what people would find scary about this. And that's not just coming from like, oh, I'm a tough man, look at my machismo, I don't get scared at horror movies. I just really don't think they even attempted anything here, unless you were just really, disturbed by the sound of a heavily filtered, creepy sounding voice, I suppose. But like, I'll give you another example of something they tried to do that I think was supposed to be scary. Victor's brushing his teeth and the lights keep flickering. Literally like the scene out of SpongeBob with the hash-slinging slasher, and they turn around and it's Nosferatu. That exact scene happens in here. Victor's brushing his teeth, the lights are flickering, he's looking up, the lights keep flickering, he turns around, and it's just Angela flicking the light switch on and off, and he's like, hey, cut that out, let's go back over here. And then he goes back to it, and the lights start flickering again, and then she just goes, what did you say? And like, that's the whole scary scene. It's like, what the fuck was that? Like, that was lame, super lame. And then there's another scene where she like attacks Victor, but it's not even like startling or a jump scare. She like comes up behind him and like attacks him super quickly, and then that's it, and he's fine. And then she just closes the door. Like, it's all just, I don't know. It feels like they didn't know what they were doing, so they just went in on filming days and improvised. I have no explanation for it because it's like they didn't even try. Also, this isn't exclusive to this movie, but I am so fucking tired of the trope that when you're dealing with a possession, all you need to do is speak sternly to it to get it out. So when Ellen does actually go and confront Catherine for a moment, her strategy is, hey, get out of there. Hey, quit goofing around. That body belongs to that child, Catherine, not you. Get out of there. Scram. Get out of town. And the demon's like, no, like struggling around and like falling and flopping like a fish out of water. It's like, what? Why does that work? Like, why is this doing anything at all? Unless it was also pranking her. But even still, that's so silly. It's so stupid. Like, she's not doing anything besides just speaking to it like a disappointed parent. Like, oh, come on now. Quit with this nonsense. Hey, come on. Like, it's just, the way that demons are fought in possession films, I think is just the goofiest shit ever. They've got to find other things to do to fight demonic possessions. Like just saying its name and it like vanishing and like screaming, it said my name, the human said my name, and then like burns back to hell is stupid. And then just them saying, hey, the Lord doesn't like what you're doing there, so get out of there. It's like, no, it sucks. It sucks. And I just needed to point that out. So let's just, I don't even know why I'm getting so into the weeds here. The movie just sucks. But let's just talk about the end here. Eventually, they tie both of the girls to some chairs and they're trying to perform a ritual with like a ton of different prayers, a ton of different belief systems that they're all throwing their way to try and get the demons to leave. Eventually, it's not working. So what ends up happening is a very powerful pastor comes in and he touches both their heads and he's like, Christ says, get out of there. And the demons are like, no. It's like everyone's getting really optimistic because it's finally working. They're going to get their daughters back. But then the daughters snap his neck with like telekinesis. So he dies. It's the only death in the film. And it was a pretty gruesome death. I didn't expect that. So that one actually caught me off guard. That was a pretty decent moment, actually. And then they never do that again. They just go back to just sitting there laughing. Like, well, not even laughing. Like, there's a scene where they're getting some, like, water tossed on them, and they're, like, screaming in agony, and, like, there's a burning sound, but they're totally still fine. And they're just... My big problem here is the demon at no point was in any danger of actually getting exorcised at all. But, for some reason, they kept pretending like they were getting somewhere, and then eventually, the demon says, you must make a choice. One of these girls will live, and one of them dies. You choose. Why? You could just have both of them because they have done nothing to actively stop you. Like they have not been able to effectively fight you. So why all of a sudden would you give up one of the girls? It didn't compute. But not only that, I'll fast forward. That was the big gamble, the big moment like, oh no, we're going to have to make a choice. And it ties into something that happened in the intro of the movie where Victor had to make a very hard choice. That I won't spoil because it's the biggest twist of the film. But anyway, it's a choice. Like, oh, we have to choose one. I can't choose. No, it's not right. Well, we can't choose between our daughters. But then eventually, the whiny dad of Catherine says, I choose Catherine. So then Angela is about to, supposedly die. She eventually levitates and then pukes onto the ceiling, falls, and we think she's dead. But then what ends up happening is Catherine dies instead, and now Angela is no longer possessed. Well, why? So the demon just let itself get killed? Like, the demon just said, I'm out, bye? He's just like, alright, this was a fun game. See you guys. I had a good time playing. Like, why? It doesn't make sense. Why would he do that? And why did he keep letting himself get caught? All the demon does is talk shit. The demon's entire purpose here is just to be an annoyance, a nuisance, flicking lights on and off, filling up the bathtub with dirty water, saying some profanity here and there. That's it. Like, it's just a prankster. It doesn't even do anything. It's not even, that evil. It only defended itself when the pastor was about to, get rid of it, so then it killed the guy. Other than that, it just kind of, chills out. Well, and I guess when it stabbed the lady's eyes. But aside from those two instances, all it is just a bother. An annoyance. And now all of a sudden, it's had its fun, so it left. Even though they have done nothing to actually get rid of it, or actually make it want to leave. It just did. For no reason. It was so unearned, it was so unsatisfying, so unfulfilling, and so lame. I don't even know how they're supposed to turn this into a trilogy. How? The only thing I could see them trying to do is be like, oh, Angela actually is still possessed. He's just hiding himself better now. And that, of course, is probably the direction it's going to go, which is the laziest direction, but the only one it can go. There's no other options left for it, so they've already spent $400 million on this. They're going to fucking make a sequel, and then a sequel after that one. It's going to be a trilogy. I feel like there's no way they pump the brakes on it. Even though this is flopped, they're going to have to because they're already so deep in the hole. I just don't know how they even try to salvage it. I don't see how. This was terrible. It was actually terrible. Laughable, even. People were giggling at this movie. It's not good. I can't believe they spent $400 on the most iconic franchise rights and blew it this badly. It's just, I don't know. It's crazy to me. But I wanted to talk about this because I think this is probably the biggest waste of money I've ever seen in Hollywood. So that's pretty impressive. That's about it. See ya.